Hello, Keith here, and welcome to the latest monthly update video on our solar and battery installation and how it's performed in November 22. It's been an interesting month. The weather has significantly impacted solar generation, plus those of you that saw the video I put out about our battery issues will know that we've had to turn our batteries off due to a comms issue between the inverter and the batteries. So just to recap, this was after a communication error that appeared on the SolisCloud dashboard, plus email alerts that we actually received from the system. It all started on the 19th of October, and on SolisCloud we had an alarm advising current leakage, and then the succession of error messages both on the app and by email. Typically, we would also see that normal behaviour would be that if the battery dropped below 20% full, then there would be a charge of the battery to take it back over 20%. But on this particular weekend, we started to see that the battery would just continually discharge and not recharge during the day until it actually drained the battery completely. Now, we did get an update from our installers last week on the cause of the issue. They advised that they understood that the issue was caused by a recent firmware update, and there's no reason to suspect that there's any effect on your solar system or its production, nor is there any safety risk associated with those fault codes. We believe that we can resolve some of the issues remotely, but sadly some of them will require a site visit to resolve the problem, and we must be guided by the manufacturer's recommendations on this to ensure that the product warranty is preserved. So we're waiting a further update. It's not clear to me whether the firmware update is on the batteries or the inverter, but my expectation that it's an update on the inverter, but I'll keep you posted on that. So on with the November 22 update. As some viewers will know already, we're slightly off a north-south alignment, but as you can see, over the course of the year, the position the sun rises and sets changes with the season, meaning that ultimately we'll get more sunshine hitting the panels over the course of the year, and we should get solar generation at the height of summer between 5 AM and 9 PM due to our orientation and the surrounding environment. So, did November 2022 continue to see a decent monthly saving in electricity costs? Well, to a degree, but the weather and the battery issue hasn't helped. As a reminder, midway through November, based on the data from timeanddate.com, the sun is rising in the direction of the southeast at around 7:15 AM, and it sets around 16:07 in the direction of the southwest. Do also remember that the UK went into daylight saving time on Sunday the 30th of October, so that's why the sunrise time is actually only 5 minutes different to what it was last month in terms of October the 15th. In reality, if the clocks had stayed the same, it would have been 55 minutes later. That being said, compared to the 15th of October, there is again nearly 2 hours less daylight, and as we move towards winter and the northern hemisphere faces away from the sun, then the sun is 10 degrees lower in the sky at noon at 20 degrees as opposed to 30 degrees elevation in October. And the weather has had a real impact on our solar generation. We have had one of our wettest Novembers on record within Essex, where I live in the UK. Our local Met Office station averages around 54 millimetres of rain for November. And as you can see from this chart, our Netatmo weather station in the back garden last month recorded 176% of our monthly rainfall at 95 millimetres of rain. And as you can see in this chart, we only had 8 days where it didn't rain, so as a result it's been very cloudy over the period. And this is reflected in our solar generation for the month. Only 12 days managed to exceed 5 kilowatt hours in generation, and on 8 days we only just managed to reach 2 kilowatt hours of generation. Our worst day was the 21st of November, and incidentally it's our worst day since we've had the system installed. We only generated around 500 watts that day. Our best day was the 4th of November, where we generated 10.1 kilowatt hours of power. And when we look at the best day that we had on the 4th of November, this is the dashboard from SolisCloud, and it shows our generation and consumption for the day. In terms of generation, we're now seeing pretty low generation levels. We barely peaked above 1.8 kilowatt hours over the day, as opposed to 3.4 kilowatt hours on our best day to date, which was in September. So as we already mentioned, 10.1 kilowatt hours of electricity was generated, of which we used 5.1 kilowatt hours and sent 5 kilowatt hours to the battery. We also used 6 kilowatt hours from the battery, along with another 11 kilowatt hours from the grid. So in total, the house used 22.6 kilowatt hours of electricity, 48% of which was from solar or battery, which is 10.87 kilowatt hours in total. And here is our electricity usage split between grid import, battery usage and solar usage. And as always, the blue is grid import, the orange is battery usage, and the yellow is solar generation usage. So the 4th was our best day. 48% of our usage was our own power. But you can also see the back end of the month, the impact the loss of the battery has had, because we've still managed to use 2 to 3 kilowatt hours per day from the battery as well, which is obviously now imported generation as the batteries are no longer charging. And here is the split between solar generation usage in terms of panels and the battery, and grid import for the month. Now, with the combination of the weather being so poor and the batteries also being out of action, it's no surprise that we've seen a real reduction in the usage of our own energy generation. So we only had 22% of our total usage within the house was on generated power in November, and that's around 30-32% less than what we saw across October and September. So how did we do in November overall? As we saw, 22% of our electricity consumption in November was through solar generation, either directly from the panels or from the battery. We generated 125 kilowatts of electricity, but the house also used 144 kilowatts of that because we had some battery storage that we used as well. So grid import costs for November was £189.65, and that was for 509 kilowatt hours, significantly higher than we've seen in October and September. Our generated usage though would have cost us an additional £50.50, so the total cost would have been, if we hadn't had the solar generation and battery storage in place, would have been £240.15 based on our total house usage in terms of electricity. And the performance overall is to be expected. We are now getting into winter. The days are short, and this is typically the wettest period of the year, October through to December. So there is likely to be more cloud and ultimately less solar generation. So in terms of costs so far, this chart shows the electricity costs for the year to date with the solar generation detail included. And as you can see, just to recap, for the first 8 months of the year we were solely relying on grid import, and the grid cost fluctuates because of two things. For January and February we were still on a fixed rate, so the costs were lower. We then moved on to the standard tariff from our supplier Octopus Energy, but we also elected to change our payments to paying for what we use rather than a fixed monthly cost, on the basis that we knew prices were going to go up. Our gas usage is low during the spring, summer and autumn, and it just made sense not to be tied into that higher monthly cost. There have also been price increases in terms of the price cap, so that's put the costs up again, both in April and in September in terms of the unit cost and the standing charge. So our grid cost for the year to date is £1,490.70, but that would have been £1,756.99 without the solar being in place, based on our total usage within the system to date. So our total solar generation to date has been 828 kilowatt hours, of which we've used 830 kilowatt hours because that includes the energy stored in the battery and obviously the residual charge that we've now drained completely due to the battery issue that we've had. So our combined savings, based on the usage multiplied by the unit costs that apply at the time, and I'm excluding the standing charge because that's a given in terms of it's always a cost there. But yeah, our combined savings are £266.22. Again, we're at that period of the year where generation figures will be at their lowest, and the savings reflect that with the fact that we've only saved £50 this month, but that is £50 less that we paid on the bill. And once we're into the new year, the days will start to get longer, and with that there is more opportunity to generate power, dependent on the weather, of course. So that's the overview of November. Next month I'll give you an update on how the system performed in December, and at the time of recording this, in early December, there is a possibility of snow over the next 2 weeks, so that could add another factor to the level of generation that we'll potentially see. I'm hoping that the battery issue will be resolved soon, especially as Octopus Energy have pulled the Agile tariff to new applicants for a while last month. Now it's available, I'd like to move to that tariff, but of course only once the batteries are back online, as the plan is to charge the batteries off peak. But I can't switch at the moment because my electricity costs will significantly rise during peak time, as I can't rely on the batteries being available at the moment. So once the batteries are resolved, then I'll look to move to that tariff. I did have a question in the comments, I think for the October video, about how I monitor my usage and capture it in Excel. So I'm planning to do an overview of that, and I also plan to create an Excel template for download for next year. So hopefully you'll see that over the course of December. And I'll also try and get a short video in on navigating around the Solis Cloud dashboard, as there have been some questions around that as well. But as always, let me know in the comments below if there's anything else you'd like to see, and if you found this video useful, please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one.